welcome to my channel. My name's Eve. I am a mental health counselor. I currently work in the US. In today's video, I want to share with you some of the work that I do and what I know about human trafficking. So I primarily work with crime victims, more specifically human trafficking, of course, and domestic violence, sexual assault. I work with the Chinese immigrant community in the US. I myself is bilingual. I speak Mandarin excellently. I like to think so. I born in mainland China. I grew up in there most of my life, and this is a huge part of me that I identified the most with. I think this is the reason I'm very motivated to work with the Chinese population. So about my work, other than what you imagine most of the counselors do, psych evaluation, psychotherapy, there's a huge part of my job that we called victim identification. So what is victim identification? Since we work with crime victims, that we need to do assessment to determine if this is a crime victim and what type of crime it is. And then of course I'm trained to screen for human trafficking, sexual assault, and domestic violence. And this is a kind of my expertise. But why we're doing victim identification? One of the reasons is also the reason I want to share this video with you, because actually not so much people really know about human trafficking. You might heard the word, you might know sex trafficking, forced prostitution, or you might heard, modern slavery, but I think a lot of people don't really know what exactly constitutes human trafficking. So that's also why I want to talk about more. So you rarely hear people calling the hotline saying that, hello, I am a victim of human trafficking. I think it's really helpful to have that explanation when you meet a client to explain what kind of situation that they were in or they are in. And explanation sometimes can be very therapeutic. Another reason to do victim identification is more for a legal purpose. Sometimes I will have clients that are victims of sex trafficking, and they might have criminal charges such as prostitution. On those cases, I will work with attorneys, maybe court or other professionals, to see if their trafficking incidents are related to those charges, and if there's anything that we can do about. Another legal reason to do victim identification is immigration related. Since I mentioned I mostly work with immigrants, most of them are not US citizens, or most of them are not a green card holder. In the US, if you are a victim of serious crime like trafficking, you might be eligible for what we called humanitarian immigration relief. I won't go in depth today talking about those visas, but what I do is I work with survivors. Sometimes I provide counsel affidavit or testimony to help them with their cases. So after all of this, what is human trafficking? Before I took this job, my idea of human trafficking was there's a very old way in China of trafficking that women will be abducted and sold into the village in far mountain. And because it's so isolated that you can't even escape, and you will be forced to marry somebody and have kids with them. And this is always my nightmare. And my mom wasn't helping, and she often used those stories, those horrible stories, to scare me, so I will be more careful with strangers or other people. But yeah, that was my idea of trafficking before I really start working on this job. But even I start working, I think there's a lot of people that I encounter hold the views that, we are in a more developed area and place, and human trafficking doesn't exist anymore, or there's a lot of misunderstanding about human trafficking. It has to be internationally, it has to involve like smuggling. So if you look at the definition of human trafficking, it looks very intimidating. You look at a subcategory of sex trafficking, labor trafficking, organ trafficking, you might have some ideas, but don't really know what it is. So a relatively easy way to understand it, trafficking is the trafficker use different unlawful ways to control a victim and to exploit the victim for profiting. So there are two keywords I want to mention. One is control. How they control the victim, what kind of ways that they use. And this is the key in adult victim identification to explain why they cannot leave the situation. Another keyword is for profiting. What's the purpose of all this? and for profiting has to be one of the reasons to meet this element. The reason I call it element is because we use what we called AMP model to do victim identification or make it a little bit easier. I will talk it a little bit more because I think it might help you to understand human trafficking a little bit better as well. So the AMP model stands for action, means, and purpose. What is action? Action is what you did to complete this criminal act. So action includes like recruiting, transporting, harboring. So what are those? Recruiting. I'm gonna exploit people, so I need people. I need to recruit people. To avoid being exposed by law enforcement or maximum my profits, I need to transporting the victims to different places. Or if I have a place such as illicit massage parlor or a brothel or a hotel, that control the victim to hide the victim, and this is harboring. And means that we will talk about is what kind of ways that they use to control the victim. So the US definition has force, fraud, coercion. But I do like the UN definition a little bit more because it's to add the abusal vulnerabilities. Coercion and abusal vulnerabilities is what we see the most frequently used, especially in the Chinese community. So coercion is more like a threat of use the force or threat to harm you, or displays of the force, display of weapons. I put the gun on the table, that is very straightforward and powerful threat. Or I thought I'm gonna post your naked picture or send them to your families. Those are what we call coercion. And let's see abusal vulnerabilities. This is one of the means that I think is most subtle and most difficult to identify because it is really difficult to prove it. For example, most of the common vulnerabilities is I need money. I need a job, I have debt, I have a whole family to support, or I just came to a new place, like a new country. I don't speak their language, I don't really know the local laws, I'm not familiar with the local resources, I don't know anybody, or I am an immigrant, I don't have a legal status yet. All of those information can be easily manipulated by somebody and put you in a position of being controlled or being trafficked. And as you can see, all of those vulnerabilities, they are not something that it can be easily controlled or easily changed by individual. So fraud always seems most frequent combining with other means to control the victim. For example, in sex trafficking, maybe the trafficker would say, oh, come to work in my massage parlor. It's just pure massage. And then you come and realize that they start convincing you or coerce you to do commercial sex. And in labor trafficking, so the difference between sex trafficking and labor trafficking, they both use the AMP model, but labor trafficking, at least in the US, there's one requirement that this victim receive little or no pay. But I like to say it's really case by case. How little is little pay, right? For example, you might get lied to and saying, oh, work for me and I will pay you $4,000 a month, and that money never comes to your pocket. Or maybe I will promise that I'll help you with the immigration and get your green card if you work for me, but you're still working for free for them. As long as meets the AMP elements, then we can see this is a huge red flag. It's very likely to be labor trafficking. But if you give me a case that this person did receive $4,000 pay, but their boss used a different kind of ways, forced them, coercion to stay in the workplace, I would like to say it's kind of rare, but we will definitely want to assess more to see what is the exploitation in this case. So P is for purpose. Why do they do it? And as we have said, for profiting has to be one of the reason. Exploitation has to be one of the reason. So this is the AMP model, and I hope this model can make things a little bit more clear that what is human trafficking. And this is also all I want to share with you in this video. But one last thing I really want to say is I will put the national hotline in the US for human trafficking in the description under this video, but please, if you are a victim or you simply just don't feel safe in your workplace, feel free to call those resources and or call 911 it is not your responsibility to identify yourself to receive services. And we all know that it's such a scary process. If you're really worried about confidentiality, you can ask whoever is speaking with you. Most of nonprofits, most of counselor will tell you the confidentiality at the beginning when you start working, and if you worry about it, you can ask what level of confidentiality that we have, in what kind of situation that you will disclose my information to other people. Even with law enforcement, that is okay to ask, and it's your right to ask. And we all know the complications of one single trafficking case. It is okay that you don't always have to go to report this individual and to go through the legal process. What is most important to you deserve to be respected. And it's okay to call somebody to say that, hey, I have a situation. I don't know what is going on, but I feel like I need some assistance. And I hope today's video that you take something with you. And the next video, I want to share with you that how you can identify some of the red flags of trafficking victims.